The galaxy was old, far older than humanity had ever imagined. Long before the first sparks of fire flickered in prehistoric caves, before the first empires rose and fell, the stars had already been claimed by great and terrible civilizations. And when humanity finally broke free of its homeworld, it found itself stepping into a universe that was anything but welcoming. The Drakari Dominion and the Valar Consortium, two immense superpowers, had carved the galaxy between them in a cold war of subjugation, deceit, and open conquest. The Drakari, a race of towering reptilian warlords, ruled with iron discipline, demanding absolute obedience from any species under their banner. The Valar, a species of enigmatic, cybernetically augmented aristocrats, saw the galaxy as a grand chessboard, one where every lesser race was a mere pawn. To them, Earth was insignificant, a primitive world that had somehow managed to stumble into the stars. The fact that humanity had not yet chosen a side was seen as an act of arrogance, one that could not be tolerated for long. A world on the brink at first, the Terran Union had hoped to stay neutral, believing that humanity's best chance of survival lay in avoiding the politics of the greater galactic powers. But neutrality, in a galaxy ruled by predators, was a weakness. Drakari warlords approached Earth with an ultimatum: submit and serve, or be ground into dust. Their empire had expanded for centuries, absorbing entire civilizations, stripping planets of resources, and drafting billions into their never-ending military campaigns. The Valar Consortium, on the other hand, offered something more insidious. They spoke in honeyed words, promising technology and trade. But beneath their elegant diplomacy was a hunger just as dangerous as the Drakari's brute force. They did not conquer with warships alone, but through economic enslavement and political manipulation. A world under the Valar's rule would not burn. It would wither, its people chained by debts they could never repay. Humanity had a choice: bend the knee to one tyrant or another, or fight. The first clashes at first, the galaxy laughed at the idea of humans resisting. Earth's military, though formidable by its own standards, was nothing compared to the vast fleets of the great empires. The Drakari and Valar had fought countless wars, crushed thousands of rebellions, and exterminated species far more advanced than humanity. And yet, the first battles did not go as expected. Instead of open warfare, humanity waged a different kind of fight, one of asymmetric tactics and relentless defiance. Terran fleets did not engage in direct battles they could not win. Instead, they struck at supply lines, disabled communications networks, and turned the war into a chaotic nightmare for their enemies. The Drakari, used to overwhelming their foes with sheer brute force, found themselves frustrated by the unpredictability of human resistance. The Valar, masters of deception and subterfuge, realized that humanity was not so easily ensnared in their political webs. Still, Earth was bleeding. No matter how many battles they won through clever tactics, the sheer scale of the enemy forces meant that their survival was only temporary. The galaxy was vast, and the Drakari and Valar had resources beyond imagining. It was only a matter of time before humanity's luck ran out. The looming invasion, Earth's leaders knew that the next strike would be the last. The Drakari Dominion, tired of humanity's defiance, prepared for a full-scale invasion. Thousands of warships gathered at the edges of Terran space, waiting for the final order to attack. The Valar, sensing an opportunity, chose not to interfere. Why waste resources when the Drakari would do the job for them? The Terran Union had one last desperate chance. A hidden gamble that could turn the tide of history, or doom humanity. Forever, deep space scouts had reported something strange. A lost world, hidden behind ancient cloaking fields. A place spoken of only in myths and forgotten records. A world once ruled by the Seraphim, a race thought to be long extinct. Desperate and out of options, Earth prepared a final mission. A team would be sent into the unknown, seeking what no one else had dared to find. The question was, would they discover salvation, or another predator lurking in the dark? The vast expanse of space stretched endlessly before them. Beyond the shimmering veil of known systems, past the last markers of Terran influence, lay the unknown. A realm of forgotten legends and whispered myths. This was where humanity's last hope resided. The TSS Endeavour, a state-of-the-art Terran Union deep space reconnaissance vessel, was unlike any ship that had ever left Earth's orbit. Built for secrecy and endurance, it carried not just humanity's most advanced stealth technology, but also its last desperate gamble. Aboard it was a crew of carefully chosen specialists, each one aware that this mission could mean the difference between survival and extinction. At the helm was Captain Elias Voss, a man whose name had become synonymous with impossible missions. A veteran of the skirmishes against both the Drakari and the Valar, he had spent years outmaneuvering superior foes, relying on cunning where brute strength failed. He had seen what awaited Earth if they lost. That was why he had accepted this mission, because he refused to be part of a history that ended in defeat. Beside him was Dr. Evelyn Rains, a xenoarchaeologist whose research had led them here. She was the one who had uncovered the fragmented records of the Seraphim, an ancient species that had vanished long before the Drakari and Valar had risen to power. Her research suggested they had been neither conquerors nor servants, but something else entirely. Something unique. And then there was Commander Joran Malik, Earth's foremost expert in deep space reconnaissance and survival. He had fought in battles where the enemy never knew he was there. He had evaded Drakari hunters in asteroid fields and infiltrated Valar data vaults that no one believed could be breached. He was their blade in the shadows. These three, along with their carefully assembled crew of engineers, scientists, and soldiers, represented humanity's last hope of finding an answer that had eluded the galaxy for eons. Dr. Rains sat at her station, staring at the last known coordinates. They weren't on any official charts. The only reason they had found them was because of an intercepted Valar data packet, one containing records so ancient even the Valar themselves barely understood their significance. "The system isn't just hidden," she murmured, adjusting her readings. "It's erased." Captain Voss raised an eyebrow. "Elaborate." "I don't mean it's just classified. I mean there is no evidence it ever existed. The gravitational distortions suggest there's a mass, a planet, a star, something, but every known chart marks this sector as empty. Whatever is there, someone went to great lengths to make sure no one ever found it." Joran Malik folded his arms. "Which means it's worth finding. The TSS Endeavour activated its stealth systems, slipping into the dark like a ghost. The journey ahead would take them weeks, traveling far beyond where human ships had ever ventured. There would be no reinforcements, no safe harbor if things went wrong. If they were discovered, the Drakari would crush them, and the Valar would ensure their mission was erased from history. As the days passed, tension aboard the ship grew. The crew knew the stakes. They had seen the reports of the Drakari fleet gathering at the edges of Terran space, ready to descend upon Earth like an unstoppable tide. There was no time for hesitation, no room for doubt. Yet doubt still crept in. What if the Seraphim never existed? Dr. Rains whispered one night, her voice barely above a breath. Captain Voss, standing beside her in the dim glow of the ship's observation deck, did not answer immediately. He looked out at the void, at the infinite stretch of stars that had never known Earth's name. "Then we keep looking," he said finally, "because the alternative is surrender." The system appeared out of the darkness like a phantom. A single star, dim and dying, hung at its heart. Orbiting it was a single planet, wrapped in a strange, shimmering field, one that their sensors struggled to define. Dr. Rains gasped as the readings flooded in. "This isn't a cloaking device," she said in astonishment. "It's something else. A temporal field? A dimensional distortion? I don't even know how to classify it." Joran Malik studied the data with a frown. "Whatever it is, it's been here for a very, very long time." Voss made his decision. "We're going down." The ship's landing thrusters engaged as they carefully breached the strange field. For a moment, time itself seemed to flicker. Screens distorted, readouts became gibberish, and the crew felt an inexplicable sensation, as if reality itself had briefly twisted. Then, they were through. And what they saw defied all expectation. The planet below was not dead. It was pristine. Great spires of unknown architecture rose from the surface, gleaming under the pale light of the ancient star. Vast forests stretched beyond, sight untouched by war, time, or decay. This This shouldn't be possible, Dr. Rains stammered. If the Seraphim are gone, who maintains this? As the TSS Endeavour touched down, an uneasy silence filled the air. The sensors picked up no movement, no transmissions, no signs of life. And yet, something about the world felt aware. Voss and his team suited up. Weapons were checked, scanners activated. The moment they stepped onto the surface, they felt it, a presence. Something vast and watching, unseen yet undeniable. Then, as they took their first steps forward, the ruins before them lit up. Symbols and pathways that had lain dormant for millennia came alive with an eerie golden glow. A message appeared before them, written in a language they did not understand, yet, somehow they felt its meaning. You are not the first to seek us, but you may be the last. Silence fell over the crew. Joran Malik's hand hovered over his weapon. I don't like this. Dr. Rain's voice was barely above a whisper. We're not alone. Captain Voss took a slow breath. His gaze locked on the illuminated ruins before them. The Seraphim were gone, but something remained. And it was waiting. The world was impossibly silent. Not the silence of death or abandonment, but something deeper, something unnatural. Captain Elias Voss stood at the forefront, his boots pressing against the smooth, untouched surface of a civilization that had been gone for eons, yet somehow still here. The air was breathable, the temperature stable, but the unsettling stillness of the city gnawed at his instincts. Behind him, Dr. Evelyn Rains struggled to steady her breathing. This was the discovery of a lifetime, but her scientific curiosity was at war with the quiet dread curling in her gut. The ruins were not ruins in the way they had expected. There were no crumbling structures, no signs of decay or neglect. The city looked preserved, as if its inhabitants had simply walked away, or vanished. Joran Malik kept his weapon ready, his sharp eyes scanning every inch of their surroundings. This place feels wrong, he murmured. Not abandoned. Just waiting. Voss nodded slowly. He felt it too. The Seraphim had disappeared long before humanity had even dreamed of spaceflight. And yet, the city's spires glowed faintly, as if aware of their presence. Then the symbols on the ground shifted. The golden glow intensified, forming intricate patterns beneath their feet. The alien language that had first greeted them now rippled across every structure in sight, and suddenly, something spoke. Not in words, not in sound, but in their minds. You are not the first to seek us, but you may be the last. Dr. Rains gasped, clutching the side of her helmet. The crew flinched, gripping their weapons, scanning for threats. But there was nothing. No movement, no enemy. Just the overwhelming sense that something vast and unseen had noticed them. Voss forced himself to stay steady. His voice was calm, but edged with warning. We are explorers. We mean no harm. The response came not as a sentence, but as a feeling. A deep sorrow, an unbearable weight of loss. Then came images. Memories not their own. A golden-skinned people, taller, and more graceful than any human, standing in harmony beneath the towering spires of this world. A thriving civilization, one that had mastered the mysteries of time, energy, and thought itself. The Seraphim, and then war. A vast and terrible war, unlike anything humanity had ever imagined. A force that did not conquer, did not negotiate, it erased. Whole species were wiped from history. Entire planets devoured in fire and oblivion. The Seraphim had fought, and they had lost. The vision faded, leaving the crew breathless and shaking. The silence returned, heavier than before. Dr. Rains wiped sweat from her forehead. They weren't conquered, she whispered. They were deleted. Malik exhaled sharply. Then how is any of this still here? Voss looked around at the gleaming city, at the pristine towers, at the strange field that had shielded this world from the rest of the galaxy for millennia. He didn't have an answer, but something inside him knew. Whatever the Seraphim had done to survive, it had come at a terrible cost. Then a new light flared across the sky, a pulse of energy, like a beacon, shooting into the cosmos. The Seraphine's world had just announced its presence, and something out there had noticed. Voss turned to his crew, his voice urgent. "We need to move. Now." A tremor passed through the air, not something physical but a shift in the very nature of reality itself. Elias Voss felt it in his bones before his mind could even process it. The golden glow of the Seraphine ruins pulsed once more, sending another ripple into the void, like a signal traveling across dimensions. The sky above, a deep swirling indigo, flickered with unseen forces. The structures around them stood too, still, as if reality itself was holding its breath. Voss turned sharply to his crew. "Malik, Rains, systems check. Tell me I'm imagining things." But he already knew the answer. Dr. Evelyn Rains was furiously working on her wrist-mounted scanner, her fingers moving with an urgency that betrayed the calm expression on her face. The data streaming across her screen confirmed what she feared. "This place isn't just ancient," she whispered. "It's shifting." Malik gritted his teeth, keeping his rifle steady as he scanned the surroundings. "Shifting?" His tone was controlled, but there was an edge to it. "Like a gravitational anomaly?" Rains shook her head. "No, like it's caught between two states. Matter here is stable, but the energy signatures are fluctuating between known and unknown properties. It's like this city isn't entirely here." Voss narrowed his eyes at her. "Then where the hell is the rest of it?" Before she could answer, a deep vibration rolled through the ruins, not from an explosion or tremor, but from something invisible. The towering golden spires hummed with sudden intensity, their surfaces shifting as if reacting to something unseen. A low-frequency pulse filled the air, more felt than heard, pressing against their skulls. And then it appeared. A structure, enormous and silent, formed in the air above them like mist taking shape. An entire section of the city had materialized out of nothingness. The architecture was unlike the rest, sleek, angular, unfinished in places, as if it had been left in mid-construction. But that was impossible. The Seraphine had disappeared millennia ago. Nothing should have been left unfinished. Rains stumbled back. "This wasn't here before." Voss activated his comms. "Command, do you read? This is Captain Voss. We have static. Not normal interference, but absolute silence. Even his team's local comms were dead." Malik cursed under his breath. "This is bad." Then the air rippled again. The city shifted, and for the first time since setting foot on this world, Voss saw movement. Not from his team, not from anything living, but from shadows. Across the metallic surfaces of the newly emerged structure, dark silhouettes flickered. Tall, elongated, seraphine-like figures, frozen mid-stride. Their forms were unnerving, stretched and fragmented, as if caught between moments in time. They didn't move naturally. They flickered, as though existing across different points in space. One of them turned. It had no face. Yet Voss felt its gaze pierce through him. A sudden whisper, not in sound but in thought, slid into his mind. "You must not stay." The temperature dropped instantly. The golden glow of the ruins dimmed, and something beyond the city stirred. The ground trembled, not from an earthquake, but from a reaction. Something vast and ancient was awakening. Voss didn't wait to understand. He grabbed Rains's shoulder, snapping her out of her trance. "We're leaving." She hesitated, eyes locked onto the flickering shadows. "But this is first contact. This could rewrite everything we know about—" Malik cut her off. "Doc, unless you want to get rewritten too, move." Then the sky ripped open, a vertical tear in reality itself, stretching high above the city. From the rupture came a deep, pulsing resonance. Not mechanical, not biological, but something else entirely. Something was answering the signal, and it was coming fast. Voss didn't hesitate. "Back to the ship, now!" The shadows twitched. The air folded, and the city, once frozen in time, started to wake up. The sky cracked like a pane of glass under immense pressure. The vertical tear stretched impossibly high, revealing an abyss beyond the visible spectrum, an emptiness not meant to be seen. It wasn't just a rift in space. It was something deeper, something primal, something sentient. Voss felt it before he understood it. A weight settled on his chest, pressing down with an unnatural gravity, a force watching rather than acting. The sensation was neither malicious nor kind. It was simply aware. A deep resonance pulsed from the rift, vibrating through the ancient ruins, sending cascades of golden dust swirling into the air. The flickering shadows of the seraphim-like figures wavered in response, their elongated forms stretching, distorting, as if resisting a force that pulled them somewhere else. "You must not stay." The whisper in Voss's mind returned, more insistent, layered with urgency and something else. A warning. Malik raised his weapon, his stance tense. "Captain, we're leaving now." Voss didn't need convincing. He grabbed Rains by the arm, snapping her out of her trance. Her eyes were wide, caught between scientific obsession and primal fear. She was a scientist, driven by the need to understand. But some things weren't meant to be understood. They turned as one, moving with precision and urgency. The city, no, the entity around them, reacted. The golden spires pulsed in time with the resonance from the rift. The ground beneath them, once solid, shimmered, the stone itself shifting between states of matter. Their steps left delayed impressions, footprints that faded into echoes before snapping back into place. Time was unraveling, twisting, resetting itself. "Move!" Malik barked, pushing forward. Then, the shadows moved. Not flickering, not distorted, but deliberate. The seraphim-like silhouettes, once frozen in time, stepped forward. Their featureless faces turned toward the humans, their forms stretching, warping between dimensions. One reached out. Voss barely had time to react. He pulled Rains back just as the elongated arm passed through the air where she had been standing. It didn't touch her, not physically, but something unseen brushed against her mind. She gasped, staggering. I saw..." Her breath hitched. "They're not dead." Malik grabbed her by the vest, half dragging her forward. "Not the time, Doc." But Rains's eyes were unfocused, her voice trembling. "They're not ghosts. They're..." The city shuddered. A deep hum rolled through the ruins, resonating through their bones. The golden glow of the structures dimmed, flickering erratically. The reality around them glitched, as if the ancient city itself was fighting against something. Voss gritted his teeth, scanning ahead. The path back to the ship had changed. The towering structures had shifted, reforming into new corridors, new passageways. The layout of the ruins was no longer the same, Malik cursed. "Where the hell is the ship?" No answer. Only the resonance. Only the rift expanding. Then came the second signal. A new frequency, deeper than the first. Not from the city, not from the rift, but from something else, from beyond the void. The very air fractured. A surge of force rippled outward, bending light, warping space, twisting gravity into impossible angles. And then, they arrived. Not through the rift. Not from the ruins. But from above. Massive vessels, dark and angular, materialized in high orbit. Not sleek warships, not mechanical constructs, but organic leviathans shaped by forces beyond human comprehension. Their surfaces pulsed with veins of deep crimson energy, their forms shifting like living things. Rains froze. "That's impossible." Malik's voice was barely a whisper. "Who the hell are they?" Voss had no answers. But he understood one thing immediately. This wasn't first contact. This was an intervention. A voice. Deep. Layered. Not spoken, but projected into their very minds. Resonated through them. "You were never meant to find this place." The city groaned. The rift pulsed, and reality began to break apart. The air fractured like shattered glass, rippling with unseen forces. Voss felt it in his bones, a pressure so immense it wasn't just physical. It was something deeper, something that pressed against the mind. He clenched his jaw, forcing himself to remain focused, but his instincts screamed at him. This wasn't a battle. This wasn't a conflict. This was something greater. Above them, the newly arrived vessels loomed, vast and unknowable. Their surfaces pulsed in rhythmic patterns, neither metal nor flesh, but something in between. Their forms seemed unfinished, as if they existed in multiple states at once, shifting slightly, as though refusing to settle into a single reality. the ruins of the lost city reacted. The golden glow that had once radiated from the structures dimmed, flickering erratically, fighting against some unseen force. The shadows of the seraphim-like figures rippled, their elongated forms staggering, no longer static. And then, the sky screamed. It wasn't a sound in the traditional sense, but a deep, wrenching wail that burrowed into the marrow of their bones. The rift above them was expanding, twisting at its edges as if it were resisting being pulled apart. The resonance that had guided them, the city's own pulse, was struggling, fighting to maintain itself. Rains staggered, clutching her head. Her breathing was shallow, rapid. "This place isn't abandoned," she gasped. "It's a prison." Voss didn't have time to ask what she meant. The voice, the layered, resonant voice that had emerged with the arrival of the alien vessels, spoke again. Though it wasn't truly speech, it was direct, injected into their consciousness. "You were never meant to come here." Malik raised his rifle instinctively. It was an automatic reaction, a soldier's instinct. But Voss knew, he knew, that no weapon would matter here. The scale of what they were dealing with was far beyond bullets, beyond strategy, beyond anything human forces could prepare for. Still, he gritted his teeth. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice firm despite the storm of chaos around them. The presence shifted. It didn't move, not physically. But Voss could feel the attention now turned fully toward him. The pressure on his mind deepened, like an ocean pressing down. "We are the Elindri, the last watchers, the final wardens." The name meant nothing. To him, no intelligence reports, no classified data files had ever mentioned them. But the weight behind those words, watchers, wardens, unraveled something deep in his gut. Rains was breathing hard, trying to steady herself. "The seraphim figures, they weren't a species," she whispered. "They were the first ones to be sealed here." Voss turned sharply toward her. "Explain." She shook her head, struggling to find the words. "This isn't just an ancient ruin. It's a containment zone. This place, this entire planet, was locked away because of something inside. The seraphim weren't the builders. They were the ones imprisoned here first." Malik exhaled, his grip on his weapon tightening. "Then who the hell built all this?" "The Elindri answered. "We did." The weight of those words sent a chill through the team. Voss took a slow breath. "You built this prison. It was necessary. You do not comprehend the thing that lies beneath." The ground shook. The ruins groaned, the vast structures shifting in ways stone should not move. The city was old, so impossibly old. And yet, it was alive in some way. It was reacting to the shift, to the changes being forced upon it. The rift pulsed, sending out an unseen force that tore at the fabric of space. Voss could feel it pulling, dragging at something beyond his perception. Then he saw them. Beneath the golden spires where the deepest shadows lay, something moved. Not the seraphim, not the Elindri. Something else. It was vast. The sheer wrongness of it made his mind recoil, unable to fully register its shape. It was both there and not there, shifting through dimensions in ways the human brain was never meant to comprehend. It wasn't just a creature. It was a concept given form, an intelligence that had long since stopped being confined to a singular body. And it was waking up. It stirs. The Elindri's voice was no longer distant. It was urgent, focused. "You must leave. Now." Malik took a step back, his instincts screaming at him to retreat. "I don't know about you, but I'm not sticking around to find out what it is." Voss knew he was right. There was no fight to be had here, no battle that could be won. This wasn't a war zone. It was something older, something far beyond human conflict. But as he turned, something grabbed at the edge of his consciousness. A whisper, a feeling. Not from the Elindri, not from the seraphim. From it. The entity buried beneath the city. The thing the Elindri had contained for untold millennia. And in that whisper, Voss understood. It was not a monster, not in the way humans defined monsters. It was something forgotten, Something that had been sealed away for a reason that even the Elindri feared to speak of. And it had been waiting. Voss's blood ran cold. He knew what this was. He had read about it, seen it hinted at in the deepest, most classified intelligence reports. The Elindri weren't just some ancient race that had disappeared. They had been the last of something. The last defenders against something older than any galactic empire, older than war, older than civilization itself, something that had been defeated before, and now it was waking up. The ruins collapsed inward, the city reacting, the golden glow, flashing in chaotic patterns. The rift convulsed, no longer a stable wound in space but a vortex, a spiraling tear between dimensions. The Elindri's ships reacted instantly. They moved in unison, vast energy pulses rippling outward, forming barriers, not weapons, but layers upon layers of containment fields, sealing, reinforcing. The message was clear. This place was never meant to be found. And now that humanity had found it, they would never be allowed to return. Voss clenched his fists. The unknown alliance wasn't about politics. It wasn't about trade. It was about keeping something buried. And if the Elindri were struggling now, if even they feared this thing's awakening, then humanity had just stepped into a war they didn't even know existed. The rift flared, blinding, light consuming the sky, and then the world snapped apart. Time did not move in a straight line. Not here. Not now. Voss felt himself being pulled, his entire being stretched across the fabric of existence. It was like falling in every direction at once, the concept of space twisting into something unrecognizable. His mind screamed at the impossibility of it, but his body was no longer his own. The rift had collapsed. No, not collapsed. It had imploded. The golden ruins of the lost city were no longer visible, consumed by the sheer, overwhelming force of the dimensional rupture. The Elindri's ships had reacted instantly, shifting their formation, their hulls glowing with impossible energy, layers upon layers of containment fields expanding outward in desperate synchronization. But Voss knew it was too late. The presence, beneath the ruins, the entity that had been forgotten, had woken up. The whisper he had felt before, the barely perceptible presence at the edge of his consciousness, was no longer whispering. It was speaking now, its voice threading through the very fabric of reality, touching his mind like the cold fingers of a thing that had long since transcended physical form. You took too long. The words weren't sound. They weren't even thoughts in the way a human would understand. They were imprinted into existence itself, a statement so absolute that Voss couldn't reject it. It was simply true. The world snapped, back into focus. He was somewhere else now. The city was gone. The golden ruins, the Elindri ships, the swirling vortex of the rift. It had all vanished. He was standing on something, a vast expanse of dark stone, stretching endlessly beneath a sky that had no stars, no light, only a faint pulsing glow in the distance. A voice. Not human. Not Elindri. Something older. He turned. And for the first time, he saw it. The Forgotten One. It wasn't a creature. Not in the way the mind expected things to be. It was a shifting concept. A presence that refused to settle into a single form. Sometimes it looked humanoid, its body wrapped in the remnants of something ancient, armor, flesh, both, neither. Sometimes it was something else, a shape beyond understanding, a thing that flickered in and out of existence, a force of nature given intent. It had no eyes, and yet he felt it looking at him. I remember you. Voss's throat went dry. You remember? He forced out. The thing tilted its head. No. It shifted, bending into another form. Something closer to human, but still deeply, fundamentally wrong. I remember your kind. The words pressed into his mind, wrapping around his thoughts like a vice. You are not the first, a flash, not a memory. Not his memory, but something else. Something given to him. He saw a battlefield. Not in space. not on any planet known to humanity. It was a war fought in the spaces between, in the cracks of reality itself. The Elindri were there. But they were not alone. Human ships. Ships that did not exist in any record. Ships that should not exist at all. Fighting alongside the Elindri. Fighting against this thing. And losing. Voss's breath caught. This... His voice was barely more than a whisper. This happened before. The entity shifted again, stepping closer. It did not walk. It did not move. It simply was, and then it was closer, standing just before him, its presence crushing. Yes. Voss clenched his fists. His heart pounded in his chest, but his mind was racing, forcing him to understand. The Elindri weren't just watchers. They weren't just wardens of some ancient cosmic prison. They had been fighters. They had stood alongside humans before, and they had failed. Another pulse of memory. Not his own, but one forced into his mind. A world burning. A star consumed. From within, human vessels twisting in on themselves as their crews screamed, and at the center of it all, the Forgotten One. Not just a creature. Not just an intelligence. A force of entropy. A being that had existed before the first civilizations. Before the first stars had burned their light into the void. A thing that had been stopped before. But never destroyed. The war hadn't ended. With victory, it had ended with containment. Voss took a slow breath. That's why the Elindri are still here. The entity did not answer. It didn't need to. Voss could feel it now, the sheer scale of what he was standing before. The prison, the ruined city, was never meant to be found. The Elindri hadn't simply been watching over it. They had been guarding it, and now it was awake again. Something in the distance cracked, a deep, reverberating sound that shuddered through the very foundation of reality. The entity turned its gaze upward, its form flickering, splitting into a dozen shifting shapes before coalescing back into something roughly human. They come. Voss felt it, too. A pull. A presence. The Elindri. They were moving. Not just the ships in orbit. All of them. For the first time in untold millennia, they were preparing for something more than just containment. They were preparing for war. Voss exhaled. His mind was spinning, his pulse hammering, but his instincts told him one thing. If the Elindri were mobilizing, if they were breaking their ancient silence, then this was bigger than just one forgotten war. This was something else. Something that had been waiting longer than anyone realized. The void above rippled, and for the first time, Voss saw the true scale of the Elindri fleet. Not a handful of warships, not a scattered remnant of a fallen civilization, but an entire armada, stretching across the black, vessels built from technologies lost to time, engines that did not burn with fire, but with the power of entire collapsed realities. They had always been here, waiting, watching, and now they were preparing to fight again. Voss clenched his jaw. This wasn't just about humanity. This wasn't just about the Elindri. This was about something older than both of them, and if they lost this time, there wouldn't be another chance. The void trembled. The ancient prison of the Forgotten One had shattered, and now the consequences of its awakening rippled across the very fabric of space. The Elindri fleet, once a silent, watchful force, came alive. Their ships, no longer content to observe, ignited with energies that defied physics, twisting the very laws of the universe. And Voss? He stood at the precipice of something far beyond himself. He wasn't a soldier, not really. He wasn't a chosen hero, nor was he a destined warrior. He was a man caught in the maelstrom of something that had begun long before humanity had even existed. Yet here he was. Here they all were, facing a war that had been waiting for its time to restart. The Forgotten One shifted again, its form flickering, between something humanoid and something beyond comprehension. It was watching, analyzing, assessing. It had been sealed away once, imprisoned by forces that had understood the true cost of failure. But now, its gaze wasn't just on Voss. It was on the fleet above, on the Elindri, on the distant stars. It had been bound before, trapped within the ruins of an ancient civilization. But it had never been defeated. Now it was free, and it was deciding what to do with its freedom. The air around Voss crackled. A deep, resonant hum filled the space between his ears. Not sound, but something more. Fundamental. The presence of the Forgotten One was not just here. It was everywhere, bleeding into reality itself. You cannot win. Voss exhaled sharply. His hands curled into fists. Maybe that was true. Maybe the Elindri knew it too. But they weren't standing. Down, the fleet moved. Voss could feel it. The shifting gravitic waves, the sheer force of the mobilization. The Elindri were activating weapons they had sworn never to use again. There was no hesitation. No second guessing. Because this was not the first time they had fought this battle. Voss's mind reeled as another memory. Not his own, but the Forgotten One's forced its way into his consciousness, a world burning. Not a single world, but many. Empires crumbling. Existences erased. It had done this before. It had seen civilizations rise, fight, and be reduced to nothing. It did not care for war. It did not care for survival. It only cared for entropy. For the unraveling of everything. The Elindri knew this, and yet, they still chose to fight. A voice, sharp and unyielding, cut through the chaos. "Commander Voss!" His mind snapped back into place. His comms, his ship's comms, were still active. His ship, the Ragnarok. He had almost forgotten. He was still linked to its systems. It had been dragged into this place with him, pulled through the collapse of the rift. And now it was responding. Surge of energy pulsed through his neural link, snapping him back into focus. His ship wasn't just intact, it was ready for war. The Forgotten One turned its unreadable gaze toward him. It did not speak this time. It listened. And in that moment, Voss understood. The Forgotten One was testing him. Not just him. Humanity. It had fought the Elindri before. It had shattered entire civilizations. It had never lost, but it had been stopped. Now it was assessing. Was humanity worth its attention? Voss lifted his head, his pulse steady now. The Elindri were preparing their final strike, but he knew they couldn't do it alone. This wasn't just their war anymore. This was his war too. His ship's AI, now fully interfaced with his neural link, sent a single alert through his mind. Weapons charged. Targeting systems locked. Voss exhaled. Then he spoke. "You don't get to decide how this ends." The Forgotten One tilted its head, as if considering. And then, the Elindri fleet fired. Storm of energy erupted from their ships, ancient weaponry unleashed in full force. These were not conventional weapons. They were designed for this, forged from knowledge that had long since been erased from history. Voss didn't hesitate. The Ragnarok roared to life, its engines breaking through the boundaries of space-time, its weapons firing alongside the Elindri. For the first time in millennia, the war had begun again. And this time, humanity was here to finish it. The impact was immediate. The Forgotten One shuddered, its form warping under the onslaught. It wasn't just taking damage, it was being forced back, its very essence pushed against the edges of reality itself. The Elindri had learned from their past mistakes, and humanity had brought something new. The Ragnarok's main cannon fired, a bomb weapon unlike anything the universe had seen before, a fusion of human ingenuity and Elindri knowledge, a final gamble. And it worked. The Forgotten One howled, not in pain, not in anger, but in something that almost resembled recognition. It had never faced this before. The attack wasn't just pushing it back, it was sealing it away, permanently. Reality fractured. The prison that had once failed was being rewritten, reforged in the heart of battle itself. The Elindri weren't just containing it, they were erasing its influence entirely. A final pulse, a deep, resounding silence. And then, it was gone. The void settled. The Elindri ships held position, their weapons still glowing, waiting, watching. But Voss knew. They had done it. It was over. The Forgotten One was no more. The comms crackled again. A voice. "Elindri, it is finished." Voss exhaled. He looked at the battlefield, not a battlefield anymore, but a graveyard of a war that had lasted longer than recorded time itself. He had no words. Only the weight of what had just happened. Humanity had not been part of this war before. But now they had proven something. They weren't just another species waiting to be swept aside. They were a force that even the Ancient Ones had to acknowledge. And the Elindri? They knew it too. Voss glanced at the fleet above. For the first time, the Elindri weren't just watching. They were looking at humanity as something more. Something worthy. He didn't know what came next, but he knew one thing. This was just the beginning.